Hi, this is Chatterboxing. I'm Sean. I want to talk about George Grosz, Chris Eubank Jr. in this video. Now, there's a week to go. I'm still undecided on who I think is going to win the fight. I'm still struggling to pick a winner. That appears to be the general consensus from what I can see. Most boxing fans see this as a very tough one to call. More people, from what I can see, are picking Chris Eubank Jr., leaning towards him. Some people saying he's going to outright destroy George Grosz. I can't see that personally, but I could definitely see why people are leaning towards him. I mean, he's younger, or maybe, I mean, he's not that much younger, but he's a lot fresher in the game. He hasn't had like all the tough fights that George Grosz has had. People can make the case that he's hungrier, and he's not a world champion, so he wants to be what George Grosz is. His work rate in his style potentially is all wrong for George Grosz. George Grosz, we've seen him fade a couple of times. He doesn't have the best stamina in the world. Chris Eubank is able to fight at a relentless pace for 12 rounds. And also people assume that he's got a good chin and he's very tough. We've never seen him fight against a big... We saw him fight Arthur Abraham, but Arthur Abraham was well past his best. Wasn't really trying to win. He was just, I mean, he's barely, as George Grosz pointed out, barely throwing punches in that fight. So we haven't seen him fight against a super middleweight big puncher like George Grosz. We've seen him take a few punches. We've heard gym stories, and because of his dad and how tough he was, we just kind of assume, you kind of put everything together and think, yeah, Chris Eubank's going to have a great chin. So that's why I think stylistically a lot of people are leaning towards Chris Eubank. Also, Chris Eubank, he likes to get you on the ropes, and he's got those vicious uppercuts that he just launches in. George Grosz seems to be, very easy to get back onto the ropes. Like, his defense isn't the best. His footwork can be quite good, but quite often he'll just get himself in that position where most people you see him fight, they can just get him back on those ropes. Now, one thing I would say is that I agree with George Grosz when he said in that ITV documentary that his preparation going into this has been a lot better than Eubank's. Now, if you look at the last two fights George Grosz had, he fought Jamie Cox and Chudanov. Now, he looked better in the Jamie Cox fight to me. I mean, Chudanov's probably better than Jamie Cox, but still, George Grosz looked a lot better. Now, Chudanov, in the first part of that fight, was just really coming forward, forcing him onto the ropes, forcing George Grosz to fight his fight, making him fight at a pace that he wasn't really comfortable with. And you thought if that went 12 rounds, then you'd have to think George Grosz would be absolutely knackered, like by the 8th, 9th round. So that was looking like a good blueprint to beat him and to really force him out of his comfort zone. But George Grosz, after about, I can't remember, like maybe 4 rounds, he started to find his range better. He started to sort of hold his feet, get his timing got a lot better, and he managed to basically, he didn't really force Chudanov on the back, but he just started hitting him clean coming in, and he wasn't just getting pushed back onto the ropes and unloaded on. So that improvement within the fight and that adjustment, and then he ended up stopping him. Now, the stoppage potentially was a little bit premature. He was catching him with some good punches, but he didn't really seem to move him. I think Chudanov could have carried on, but obviously the ref was in there and he was getting hit clean. But anyway, he got the win, and the point is that he started to improve and he started to adjust to that. Now, is Chris Eubank as strong and as tough as Chudanov? Don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Now, Jamie Cox. Now, I don't think Jamie Cox is as good as Chudanov, but he's quicker, and he's a southpaw, and he's very aggressive. So George Grosz, I don't understand people saying that was a bad performance. I mean, yeah, he was on the ropes a couple of times. That happens with George Grosz, and also when someone is just like recklessly charging in like that, like Jamie Cox was, it's very, very difficult to to not find yourself on the ropes. I mean, he was catching him with some big punches coming in, catching good body shots, catching him with a straight right hand. I was impressed by that performance, and I thought his timing was good. I thought it was an improvement from the Chudanov fight, and I can see the improvements going along. So you would expect that now going into the Chris Eubank fight, that would be even better. And he has had that good preparation, good kind of sparring partners, if you like. It's obviously, but do you know what I mean? Like, he's prepared himself well for this fight. Now, Jamie Cox did take a few punches coming in, but ultimately he got knocked out, and he did get like rocked quite a few times. He got Grosz onto the ropes and he hit him with some good punches. Got him with a left hook, I think, at one point, which kind of not wobbled him, but you could tell that did some damage. Grosz a couple of times tried to fight his way out of there. Looked a little bit shaky, just sort of swing a few punches and then just sort of cover up. Looked a little bit unsure of himself. But there were other times when he was quite composed and he just catch him, sort of tie him up, turn him around and literally just sort of force him, walk him back across the ring and start unloading his own punches. Obviously, Jamie Cox was smaller than him. Chris Eubank he's quite a bit smaller than him. Chris Eubank, we know, is very, very fit. He looks strong. Is he going to be able to, if George Grosz is going to sort of force him back like that, is he going to be able to prevent it? I don't know. In terms of sheer body mass, you say George Grosz is significantly bigger, clearly a much harder puncher. Is he physically stronger? I'd imagine so, but we don't know. So that's going to be interesting to see how he gets himself out of those. He can't afford to be, just like trying to trade with Eubank there, because Eubank's punches from that range are much quicker. Like, George Grosz got very, very fast, like one punch hand speed, and he can put combinations together quite well. But I'd say his jab is quicker. His counter straight right hand, very quick. Really good body shots. You saw them in the Jamie Cox fight. But in terms of kind of combinations on the inside, I think Chris Eubank Jr. is quite a bit faster. He's also got a lot better movement. He's much more agile than George Grosz. George Grosz, his defence is basically his feet. So if you're against the ropes, that's not really going to do you much good. I don't see George Grosz particularly. Yeah, his slip jab, something, slip a punch, but you don't really see him really parrying, blocking, catching anything. I mean, occasionally you do, but really he's got quick feet, and that's how he defends himself for the most part. Chris Eubank Jr. has got very, very good head movement, very agile, very good upper body movement. Now, it's sometimes not the cleverest movement, but he's able to get himself out of these situations just from his extreme agility. I mean, you saw in the last fight at Yildirim, I mean, he was sort of ducking down and literally sort of flying all over the place. Now, if he was fighting against someone who had the same kind of agility as himself, then he would have got himself into trouble. But because he wasn't, he was really able to compensate for that. Now, in terms of his preparation going into this, I mean, he fought Yildirim. And who did he fight for that? Arthur Abraham, I think. Now, Yildirim was obviously strong, tough, I suppose. He was unbeaten. But he's nothing like George Grosz. I'm not saying Jamie Cox is that much like Chris Eubank, but at least he was coming into him, putting the pressure on him, trying to get him onto the ropes and throw a load of punches. And he was smaller and quicker. Yildirim was basically very straightforward, just come for it. It was a mismatch, really, like stylistically. Chris Eubank said himself, he could throw about 5 punches before he threw one on the inside. So, and he can just do it. He can sort of duck under as he does, and switch off, like just pivot off, and there was nothing really that Yildirim could do to him. So it was a good performance, impressive. It was good for I'd say his mindset more than anything else, because obviously he went into very hostile territory. He was in Germany fighting against a big Turkish community. Obviously the Turkish fans, all the welcome to hell. They create a very hostile atmosphere. So he went in there, didn't care, did a job on him. So that was good for his mindset going in. So I don't think he particularly needed much confidence. But if you compare that to the Billy Joe Saunders fight, when he went in and he was, that was a very pro Billy Joe Saunders crowd. Again, quite an intimidating crowd. And he kind of didn't really perform to the best of his ability in that. Now, obviously, you give a lot of credit to Saunders for that. But still, I can see the development in terms of his big stage confidence. And George Grosz obviously been there, done it. He's fought against, James DeGale very early on in his career. Everybody thought he was going to lose that. There's a lot of pressure. Went out to Las Vegas to fight Badou Jack, who in my opinion is one of the best fighters in the world. Gave a very good account of himself in that, much better than James DeGale did. Fought against Carl Froch, got very, very unlucky. Gave a beating to Carl Froch for most of that fight. Shouldn't have been stopped. I do sort of look at it and think maybe, I can't remember what round it was in. Was it the 10th round? I do sort of think, yeah, it looked like Carl Froch coming on strong, and I'd certainly, if I had to put money on it then, I would have picked Carl Froch to stop him at some point. Anyway, that was a big fight. No one expected him to win, and he's been there and done it, so he's got a huge advantage in experience. In terms of like quality people he's been in with, like Carl Froch, Badu Jack, James DeGale. Yeah, James DeGale was a bit of a novice back then, but so was George Grosz. So let's just say Carl Froch and Badu Jack. I mean, these are two world class fighters. Those who he's lost to gave a very good account of himself. Okay, not in the third Carl Froch fight, but the other two. So he's been in there with a lot of style. He's been in there, trained with Adam Booth, trained with who else did he? He just went to Paddy Fitzpatrick. He doesn't seem to see that as a particularly positive experience. I don't know. I mean, but he's trained with Adam Booth. He's training with Shane McGuigan. He used to do a lot of training with David Hay. He's quite experienced, and I think he's quite well schooled. So Chris Eubank, he's just someone who's a bit of a natural born fighter. I mean, he says he's not trained by anyone. I don't know if that's true or not, but he certainly does fight in one style. Like, he just literally sort of gets in there, tries to outwork you. He doesn't really have much of a game plan, from what I can see. Maybe that will change for this. I mean, he did show quite a good jab for the first time against Yildirim. A quick jab, at least. Well, I would say, though, that jab, though it was quick, he was literally just like bringing it straight back down. So against someone like George Grosz, who's taller, very good timing, well experienced, got that lethal right hand, I can see that being a problem for Chris Eubank. If he does that to George Grosz, he could get caught with a big right hand. Because you can't just throw that jab and then bring your hand straight back down against Grosz. Because he's going to basically just punish you with that right over the top. Also, as he leaps in, you know what I mean? He can't afford to just dive in, launch himself in with these wild uppercuts and stuff. If he does, I can see George Grosz catching him and seriously hurting him. If George Grosz can't put a dent in him, if he's that tough, then I know he's not going to beat Chris Eubank on points if he can't dissuade him. I could see him outboxing him, a bit like he did James DeGale. I can see George Grosz fighting on the back foot, using his feet well, but catching him with very hard counters to try to dissuade Chris Eubank from just, charging him for 12 rounds. So back to what I was saying about the preparation. Before that, he fought Arthur Abraham. Yeah, Arthur Abraham was, at that stage, was basically just a big punch bag. He was a good name back in his day, but he wasn't really that much of a threat at that stage. So, he stood there, he sort of carried tough, high guard, doesn't really fight anything like Chris Eubank, like George Grosz. He's not he wasn't like a fast jab, moving around, hard counters. So, I don't know. I don't really see that the preparation of Chris Eubank has been very good going into this. But maybe that's not going to matter. Maybe it's just a case of stylistically, it's just going to be a nightmare for George Grosz. So I'm going to make a final prediction before the fight, but right now I just wanted to give that kind of breakdown of how I see the preparation and possibilities that could happen in this fight. So let me know what you lot think, and thank you very much for watching.